Okay, this here is an army configuration I based on some of Dr. Faust's stuff. I think Dr. Faust, that's what the watermark said, so that's what I'm going to go with. He had some designs where he put some magnetic MDF board. Here's some board I haven't magnetized yet, but I will probably in the future when I add more cases as I need them. And this is for 40k armies because it's based on sort of round bases. I had to do some modifications to the design and get off, move it. Cats. Anyway, I had to modify a lot of the design for round bases. And also, I did some other stuff. Dr. Faust had a design where he had handles on his MDF boards. I use the same kind of MDF boards and roughly the same kind of magnets. They offer roughly the same amount of strength. I can just do like that and my guys were okay. It's like 104 Tyranids there. All holding pretty sturdy. But I did not put handles on mine like Dr. Faust did, because if I did that, I wouldn't be able to actually fit this in the bottom of this case, because the bottom of this case is slightly more narrow than this board cutout, and it's not by much. It's like about 1/8 of an inch, but 1/8 of an inch is enough for it to stick up oddly. So if I tried to do it that way, then I would... Come on, Hormigaunt. Your arms are always a problem! Then I would encounter problems like this. And it would sort of... Yeah, it would sort of stick at an angle. So instead of doing that, if I did that, I would need a handle to get it out. And now I can't get it out with one hand. Hang on. Well, that was a bother. That should suffice to say, measure twice, cut once. In fact, even if you're sure, you probably get the case before you cut the board, because I had to sort of like ramshackle this together. But that was alright, because I figured out a way I could do this. As you can kind of see the way I've done with the rest of my armies, I just put the board on the lid, so I'm basically flipping the entire contraption on its head. Because Dr. Faust had to get all the handles and stuff. That was the hardest part for me, so I just decided to forget that, and I just store them like that. It's got a fairly good threshold as for what it will store, because, let's get some of these guys so they're nice and mostly painted. These are a lot of what I use for my Night Lords. These are like all the ranks of my infantry. I got the objective... Let's point the camera at them. I got the objective markers here. Here. Pretty much any guy with a round base. And here. It's hard to feel with my fingers and look with the camera. And here. I think that's an objective markers for 6th. It was enough for 5th. Anyway, this board is fairly sturdy. The only guy I really have to worry about falling off is this guy, because he's that heavy metal Cenobite servitor, but everybody else is generally alright. Yeah, there's not a lot of metal there. This guy is also based on like metal berserker, but it holds fairly well. And what I did to magnetize them on was I got a lot of zinc washers. These are 1-inch washers, and I super glued them to all the bases of my models. I got that idea from my Hormagaunts, actually, because it's like common Tyranid tradition to super glue pennies and nickels under your Hormagaunts so that they'll actually stay put and so they won't just fall over. It works fairly well with the washers, because you see, you'll stand him right up and he'll be fine. In fact, you could hang him over the edge of a table and he'll be fine, because the washer just weighs him down. And they stick onto these nice little ranks. Yay! Also in here, I managed to magnetize in 2 dreadnoughts. Well, one and most of another. Because here, this dreadnought has a metal arm that I'm debating on gluing in. I'll take it out for purposes of illustration. I got some metal cast terminators that are sort of done up with Thunderhammer Storm Shield. Counts as army, haters gotta hate, blah 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 blah. And ooh, yeah, I'm thinking of getting bigger washers for the Terminators. Problem is I haven't seen washers sold at any hardware store in any capacity that can hold a Terminator. The Dreadnoughts work just fine if I actually glue 2 rows of 2 washers each underneath the base. You'll find a couple of places under the base where if you glue them in just right, it'll hold the Dreadnought in. Let's take off these middle dudes and illustrate how well the Dreadnoughts hold up. These Dreadnoughts are, of course, mostly plastic. Mostly plastic. There he goes. So, generally they'll do fine. Metal models, you'll need a bit more, because the problem with using washers for this, they're nice and round. They're great for 40K miniatures. Dr. Faust was demonstrating fantasy miniatures, and he had to use squares, so he couldn't do this. But if you're using washers, they make the model heavier. And what that'll do is that the heavier it is, the stronger the magnet needs to be, because magnetism is based on mass. So the mass of the magnet determines the strength of the magnet. That's why neodymium magnets are so strong, because you look how low on the how far down on the periodic table they are. They're pretty dense. So if you're using like comparatively weak little sheet magnets, you're going to need a little bit more than these kind of washers if you're working with anything metal. Never mock the fine cast, because if you're dealing with fine cast, you pretty much never have to worry about that. I only have like 1 fine cast miniature, it's like a Dark Eldar Archon, and I haven't tested him yet because I ran out of washers working on all of them guys. But that's the basic design. Pretty much the last thing to show off here is, you'll notice a lot of things won't quite fit on there, like namely the Storm Ravens. So I had to cobble up together a larger case. This one is about 6 inches deep, so I think it's the 17 liter. These are, let's see if I can get a brand. If you see this, really useful products.com. I think these fall under really useful boxes. They're a little more shallow on the inside than they are on the outside, and that can cause some problems if you're using outside measurements. Anyway, Storm Ravens, I'm not going to really do any dancy tricks because Storm Ravens are really heavy and I haven't quite figured out how to magnetize them yet. I had a thought that I will show, but keep in mind this doesn't work. I've tried it out. I've put little sheet magnets on their feet, on the treads of them, and I was hoping that was going to keep them standing around. That was also dual purpose, to sort of hide the Aquillas and hide the fact that this is a giant counts as Blood Angel army, yada yada yada. But things like icons, they won't stand up quite right if you don't put them in a taller case. So I've used the taller cases for things like monstrous creatures and whatnots. Storm Ravens, Trigons, and metal Hive Tyrant seem to have problems. I haven't tried out the new plastic Hive Tyrant yet because I don't own one. It's like throwing good money after bad trying to buy things for Tyranids right now. But like infantry class models, they'll work just fine. You'll probably need your kind of own separate storage apparatus for these big guys anyway. But it'll work fine for the little guys. Even about up to a Dreadnought, it'll hold. As long as the Dreadnought's all plastic, not like that one there that's got the classic Furioso metal arm. But anyway, here's the contraptions, and I just close the lids over here. Also, one last design decision I made, contrary to Dr. Faust's design, is that Dr. Faust had this, excuse me, alignment is everything here. Dr. Faust had this big, long, big, wide case, like going from about here to about there. That was a bit wide for me because I carry a lot of stuff. I mean, look at all this stuff. This isn't even everything. This is maybe half of everything. And I was thinking more, rather than stacking stuff long, stacking stuff high. If I stack stuff high, I can put it on a little roller cart and roll it into all the game stores I go into and just pull out the stuff. Because if you put all this together, it's a lot of stuff. Because if I tried to put all these in figure cases, all this would fill a figure case. It would maybe fit into one of these things, which is quite smaller than a figure case. This is like 2 inches deep and can hold basically 8.5 by 11. It's the kind of thing that you use to hold like memos in. I got these at like Office Depot, Staples, and that could all go in there, so I could just stack these up pretty much as high as I wanted and pretty much just walk into the game store. I would probably get something else for the Storm Ravens, the monstrous creatures and whatnot, but this is pretty solid for infantry based stuff, so keep in mind the weight when you're trying to do this yourself. But a lot of I don't know if I mentioned this before, zinc washers, just in case I haven't mentioned it, because I was actually walking into Home Depot carrying around a little fridge magnet trying to test out which washers are magnetic and which are not. Not all of them are. Go with the zinc fender washers. That's what I found that works, and they work pretty well for anything up to an assault marine, which are kind of bulky. And also, you can magnetize Storm Raven bases. They're tall, but they're not incredibly heavy because it's all weight-based. And I plan to make more of these in the future, to store more armies and store them a little more compactly after I figured out that storing Storm Ravens that way didn't work. But here's the basic layout of how I'm storing my armies using Dr. Faust's method.